Hello, welcome to the Global Mirror. I'm Ritangshu Bhattacharya. Ladies and gentlemen, this Thursday will mark the third anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The good news this week is that after a 3-year-long and bloody war, we have never been more closer to securing a deal which ends it. The bad news, at least if you're from Europe, is that peace, if achieved, will come at the cost of your relevance in the region. As we speak, there are two summits that are about to begin. One is in Saudi Arabia, where Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov, along with Putin's officials, are set to meet US Secretary of State Marco Rubio and begin talks on ending the Ukraine war. Intriguingly, Ukraine itself is missing from the talks table, along with most of the European Union, which is why they are now having an emergency meeting in Paris to try and understand how and why they are being blindsided by the United States. Indeed, Trump's handling of the Russia-Ukraine peace talks has thrown much of Europe into a frenzy. Donald Trump has long criticized NATO and has pushed European members to up their defense spending, accusing the European nations of freeloading. His rhetoric has strained transatlantic nations with his claim that Europe must pull their weight, influencing his stance on Ukraine.
The threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America. President Trump has made abundantly clear he believes that our European friends must play a bigger role in the future of this continent. We don't think, you hear this term, burden sharing, but we think it's an important part of being in a shared alliance together that the Europeans step up while America focuses on areas of the world that are in great danger.
Now, Europe faces a dilemma: unite on defense and security, possibly sending troops to Ukraine to force its involvement, or risk being left out. The potential for sending troops to Ukraine after a ceasefire complicates matters. Europe's leaders must now have to balance domestic economic concerns and political divisions to present a united front. If they fail, they risk being sidelined in negotiations even further, affecting their security and their influence. In fact, Ukrainian President Zelensky has long insisted that Ukraine must be part of peace talks, warning that the era of guaranteed US support for Europe is over. He has also urged Europe to find a united military and foreign policy to tackle the Russian threat.
Україна не братиме, Україна про це нічого не знала, а Україна розцінює будь-які переговори про Україну без України які не мають результату, і ми не можемо визнавати будь-які речі або будь-які домовленості про нас без нас. І ми не будемо такі домовленості визнавати. Напевно, там є двосторонній трек України, і вони мають на це, я маю на увазі Сполучені Штати, мають на це право, якщо у них є двосторонні питання. І, якщо чесно, вони і до цього про це говорили, тільки тепер стали публічно говорити.
Now, while Trump is eyeing a swift resolution, Europe's internal divisions could determine whether it plays a role in shaping the future global order, or will Donald Trump and the world reshape the geopolitical order as he deems fit? That is, of course, the big question that we are looking at this point, and we'll be going across to guests and stakeholders from all parts of the world at this point. I'm being joined by Professor Madhav Nalapat, who is the Vice Chair of the Manipal Advanced Research Group. I'm also being joined by David Sofair, Republican strategist, and Ivan US, PhD Chief Consultant at the National Institute of Strategic Studies. He's joining us from Ukraine. Thank you all, gentlemen, for joining us today. Let me start with you, David. What indeed, if at all there is one, is the feasibility of any hypothetical peace treaty that can be achieved in Saudi Arabia as we speak, if it doesn't have the European Union, even Ukraine, present at the talks table?
I think that it's important to say that these are the preliminary peace talks, okay? So we are in the beginning stages of achieving peace, which is a shared goal of the United States and Russia and Ukraine at this point. Secondly, it's a bit pernicious to say that these peace talks should be held in France, as the French have not stepped up to the plate whatsoever. They have not paid on time their commitments. They've not honored their commitments in a financial response. So it's too early, in my opinion, to say that we need European troops there. So we need to really figure out what the solution is here. Secondly, Germany as well. Their talks at the table, they're sort of double dealing, in my opinion. They have continued to trade with Russia throughout the entire conflict. So America has been very generous with Ukraine, and we are still working to actually find a long-lasting strategy for peace. I would say that in the past 3.5 years or 4 years now, this is the most significant and groundbreaking step towards peace, which is really the end game. I mean, let's make it clear: we want no new wars, and we want peace. We are the party of peace, through strength, of course. So whilst there was a contagion effect with just a few months ago, you saw a lot more tension happening, especially in China and Russia. Now that is subsiding. We are also, just trying to close it all down. So look, we're dealing with very regional challenges and conflicts, and it's tough. It is tough, and it is uncomfortable, especially for the Europeans. They have not really stepped up to the table as far as GDP spending goes on defense, and they certainly have with the messaging and what's actually happening is not the case when it comes to Ukraine aid and help. So I think they're putting the cart before the horse by sending troops to the border and sending troops to Ukraine at this moment in time. So we really have to see how it unfolds.
Okay, so if taking that into account, let me bring in Ivan here. Ivan, is Ukraine being unnecessarily pessimistic, and dare I say even throwing a bit of a sulk in a bit of a peace talks which are scheduled in Saudi Arabia? Because after all, let's be honest, an end to this war is something that can only be good news for the people of Ukraine, right?
Greetings to you, greetings to guests and all audience. Sometimes peace is not the best solution if it's not just peace. Because in Ukraine, first of all, people say that Russia started this war. According to September, damage that caused by Russia estimated at $1.164 trillion. So we understand that enormous amount for 3 years, practically for 3 years of full-scale war Russia created to Ukraine. So, of course, for Ukraine, all those peace talks, it's first of all attempt to forget about crimes committed by Russia, forgot about damage committed by Russia, and of course, it's a loss of Ukrainian territory. It's something like Minsk in 2015, when Ukraine practically say, okay, we are losing Crimea, Peninsula Crimea, we are losing some part of Donbass. And now, what do we see in those talks when someone said that guys forgot about the other territories? So taking into account experience, it means that in several years, it will be third attack of Russia, and who knows, probably from the third attempt, Russia can succeed and destroy my native Kyiv city where I'm living, destroying some other cities, and after Ukraine, it will be not dot. After Ukraine, it will be some other European countries, namely Baltic countries, probably Poland, because President Putin said that Warsaw was in Russian Empire many centuries ago, but he wanted to return it. So quite possible it's not the end of the story. And for me, now was a conference in Munich. I calculated that in Munich happens a lot of bad things for whole world history. Second World War starts after Munich deal in 1938. Then President Putin in 2007 made his famous speech, which means start of conflict is best. Now this Munich conference is another chapter in this, as for me said, Munich story. Thank you.
I'll come to Professor Nalapat in a minute, but David Sofair, comment on what Ivan's been saying. Is President Trump insistent in just merely buying a peace in name or merely buying a ceasefire? Because the body language, or at least the tone and tenor that have come in from both the White House and the Kremlin, is quite, may I say, quite oblivious of the fact that at least Ukraine and much of the Western world believes that Russia committed quite serious war crimes in trying to be expansionist in his approach. And given the damage and total devastation it has wreaked in Ukraine over the past 3 years, can there truly be just peace if there are no reparations or no recriminations being sought from Russia instead? Or the Western world seems to be actually congratulating Russia for even deciding to talk in the first place?
They're saying that they're congratulating Russia is that's a strong thing. Definitely they are no threat under ours. We are not here in the United States. We are not pro-Putin, not pro-Russia. We are pro-peace and pro-democracy. Secondly, this is an ongoing negotiation for peace. And this is the preliminary stage of that. So we cannot put the cart before the horse to see what is outlined in the exact proposal. So whether that's a monetary proposal, whether that's the relation with NATO, so we need to look at these things. We also need to figure out who's going to pay for the rebuilding of Ukraine. Which is, there's substantial damage there, and Russia will definitely have to come to the table. They have a lot of, they already have a lot of debt from this war, but on the rebuilding process, that will be key. And to see what ramifications there will be for them is very important as well. So I do agree with those points. I mean, what President Putin has done is, reprehensible. It is war, and he has attacked a sovereign nation. We're not denying that. So it'll be very interesting to see how it pans out in Saudi Arabia, and it will be very interesting to see the messaging which will happen in Paris, because so far there is such a big disconnect from what our friends and allies in Europe say and what they actually do from a monetary perspective, and then from a military perspective as well. As I was saying earlier, with the Germans and the French. So we'll have to see. And then the Italians are at the table as well. And I think the Italians will have a uphill battle convincing the people of Italy, as the overwhelming majority of them there do not want any Italian funding whatsoever, and certainly do not want any Italian troops to be sent over to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So we really need to see how these... You
continue to underscore a very visible...
unfold.
Okay. All right, David, so you continue to underscore a very visible sense of discontent with the United States, or at least the current administration has with the European Union. And on that note, let me bring in Professor Nalapat. Then, Professor Nalapat, is the EU then justified in taking this moral high ground by claiming that they must be necessary stakeholders in any peace resolution in the region? After all, let's be honest, the European Union has failed spectacularly in... And by European Union, I'm also going to bring in the previous Biden administration as well. The West, in that case, has failed in preventing, controlling, or ending the war.
Look, I'd like to say that I'd like to be charitable and say that some of my co-panelists are unaware of the facts. I'm not going to say that they are playing with the facts. Let me assume they are unaware of the facts. The fact is that umpteen peace conferences have taken place in Europe, in the United States, in Canada, without Russia. Now you have a peace conflict with a resolution process in which one adversary is always missing. I repeat, always missing. Now, as J.D. Vance correctly said, not only is Russia missing, but from 2022 onwards, Russian television, any Russian pro-Russian view inside the EU or the US or Canada was regarded as a hostile act even by their own citizens. Freedom of speech was completely absent, and the big tech titans played along. And they joined in this boycott of, for example, all Russian news items, and frankly censored any item that was talking in terms of the Russians having a case. I mean, you're talking about the Minsk conference. Please do read any elementary textbook. The Minsk conference was underwritten by Germany and France, and the leaders of both Germany and France, Angela Merkel, to her credit, was first admitted that from the beginning they had absolutely no interest in carrying out the conditions of the Minsk agreement. Only the USSR should carry it out. And as far as Ukraine is concerned, no, they believe certainly not. And from the beginning, when they signed that document, guaranteeing that France and Germany would override, the Minsk agreement, they were clear that they were not going to do so. Now now they're opposing a peace treaty or a discussion of a peace treaty, or what Mr. Sofair calls a preliminary negotiation without Ukraine. Well, why didn't they object when it was without Russia? Look, please allow me a little bit of time. I'm representing the point of view of a fairly significant country as an ordinary citizen. So look, the fact is that, as far as Europe is concerned, Trump is bad news for them. In the financial markets, LIBOR is being replaced with other alternatives, and that is very bad news for the UK in particular, which has got so much control over international banking, as do Frankfurt and Zurich. Now, the reality of the situation is that J.D. Vance made it very clear that it is no longer Europe that is numero uno in the US strategic calculus. It is Asia. It is no longer the Atlantic. It is the Indo-Pacific. And for heaven's sake, that is reality. These people are living in a delusionary world, completely delusionary world, in which they have created alternative reality, and that alternative reality is allowed to basically permeate their discussion. I'm talking facts here. Russia was not invited to any of these peace conferences. The Minsk Treaty was broken at the start by Germany and France. And frankly, the reality situation is the Europeans want a treaty which Russia will accept as a surrender. And that is not something that any self-respecting country, least of all a country with such potent nuclear weapons, with such a large landmass and potential soldiery, which, by the way, as has been pointed out by several in the Trump team, was instrumental in winning the war. I mean, 2 million Indian soldiers fought in that first war. 2 million Indian soldiers fought in the Second World War. How many memorials were erected by
Ivan, come in here.
To them? I would say very clearly, I can't hear them. And the reality is, why were our casualties low? Because they fought on the UK side. And the UK fought only after Russia had completely exhausted the Nazis, those foul, vicious psychopaths. And they completely exhausted them. And the German army was defeated when the UK entered the fray.
Okay, Professor Nanapat. Professor Nanapat, strong words. Let's come back to the issue at hand. Ivan, then come in here. Is President Zelensky then worried of Ukraine being left behind in this newfound warmth that we are now seeing between the United States and Russia, courtesy the winds of change that have been brought in by the Trump administration? Is that the reason why President Zelensky is so worried and anxious despite perhaps the war imminently ending soon?
First, very important amendment, not Russia win versus Nazi. Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. 3 countries that was a part of Soviet Union, and in Ukraine we are always angry when we hear that Russia win the war versus Hitler. It was Ukraine first of all, then Belarus and Russia, if you look at the map. So about current time Of course, we understand that approach of President Biden, that there is no talks about Ukraine without Ukraine in the history. According to Trump, they quite possibly discussed the future of Ukraine without Ukraine. It's new reality. But as President Zelensky said, that we will not recognize this deal, as European partners say that they will not recognize this deal because Europe wants to be on the table. Frankly speaking, Ukraine in future plan to be a country of the European Union. We don't want to be the 51st state of USA. We don't want any other union. We want to be in European Union. That's why Ukrainian problem, it's a problem of European Union. And now when we see this talk, so first of all, we will see, because, tomorrow will be interesting meeting between Russia and US in Saudi Arabia. President Zelensky expected to be in Saudi Arabia tomorrow too, but he changed his mind, and tomorrow he will be in Turkey with President Erdogan. It's a very important meeting because sometimes, especially when we see that US try to be out of the game, I have a feeling that Turkey can play a more important role, because historically Turkey and Russia always was enemies, and Ukraine understands that. That's why actually tomorrow will be meeting between President Zelensky and President Erdogan of Turkey, and after that Zelensky will be in Saudi Arabia and talk with Mohammed bin Salman about talks that take place the day before that between Russia and US. So it's agenda for today, but you know that when President Trump won the elections, it started to be concerned that anything could be concerned, meaning that chaos and instability is probably phrases that could describe our current life. But of course, we are watching for what they will discuss. Quite possible that they will not discuss Ukraine. US and Russia has a lot of things between them without Ukraine, as President Zelensky said, about Syria, about other moments. So we will see, but of course we are waiting for the results that will be in that meeting. But if something will touch Ukraine and will not respond to Ukrainian interest, of course, Ukraine said that we are not agree with that, and try to explain to the United States of America that if they want to preserve their leading role in the Western world and their leading role of their currency dollar in this world, they should not be against Europe with Russia and form ally with Russia against everyone in this world. Thank you.
David Sofair, does it then come back to an issue of money? Is the European Union being punished for not funding Ukraine's war even more? Now, we have those numbers and we'll put it out on the screens also. While it's definitely a fact that the United States is the single largest donor, the fact also is that the European nations, both individually and also collectively, still pool in the largest amount of aid for Ukraine.
So that's actually, in regards to France, that's not an accurate figure, because that is the total amount that they committed to pledge. Now, if you look at the books, we can see online, it's readily available that they have not fulfilled their commitment at all. So that's France. Now, with Germany as well, you see that number there. Again, Germany has a massive surplus in Europe, and they have and they continue to trade with Russia as well. So how can you really aid Ukraine when you continue to be a massive trading partner with Russia? So they're double dealing, in my opinion. Now, the US is also, that number there is much, much higher. That is just the most recent number there. So, and that's not including our military or actual military devices as well. So I just from a cursory look, I see these numbers as inaccurate. And America's number, I would say, is probably about 4 to 5 times higher, whilst I don't have those exact figures in front of me this second. So look, at the end of the day, we need to see how this is going to play out on these two things. And also, it's important to say that Europe's in a bad shape right now. You have President Macron is extremely unpopular in France. France is struggling, and to suggest that the French and the Germans are now going to make 5% or 4.5% of their GDP now to army and military and defense spending. I mean, look at the UK. They're struggling with their budget with, a very unpopular Labour Party with Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves. I mean, they have not balanced a budget. They are so this is a very heavy lift, and it would be you just can't turn on the spigot and create defense. This is a long view, and to say that they want to have 20,000 soldiers, on the front lines of Ukraine and Russia. I mean, this is a gargantuan task. I mean, this is about half of the ready and able-bodied UK military. So just to say these things, I mean, it all sounds very virtuous in some sort of virtuous EU emergency meeting for peace. But when you boil it down and look back at it, what they say and what they actually do and what they can do is there'll be a big disconnect. And the other thing is America is still an ally, it very much is an ally, and we are close to peace and getting a resolution on the table and moving forward to peace and democracy. And the EU will be a part of that as well. So it's interesting, to hear your other panelists' view about how they're going to meet with Turkey and Erdogan as well. So it is a multifaceted approach to a war, a unbelievable war with hundreds of thousands of people dying that are still dying now, which has got to stop, and it's got to stop now. And that is the common goal that we have, which is not being addressed because of Europe's, what I would say is double dealing. They are double dealing in this. So we'll have to see how it unfolds. Again,
so
on both sides.
There's one thing that does come out at this point, and I'll probably go to Professor Nalapat for the last word. Professor Nalapat, are we seeing a redrawing of the global world order, ironically, with a complete reversal of what we saw during, say, the Cold War, where we are now seeing the United States and Europe getting dehyphenated and unprecedented proximity brewing between the White House and Kremlin?
Both my other panelists to read the speeches of who are now the present CIA chief, the present FBI chief, the present director of national intelligence, and the present NSA about Turkey. And I do not, that view is very different from Biden's view. And the Trump people are straightforward. They operate in a straight bat. Are you telling me seriously that Europe or the European populations will tolerate death on the battlefield against Russia? Are you telling me that? Certainly the United States is not going to be part of the picture. President Trump is nobody's patsy. He won't allow it. And he's a true blue American. He's not somebody in America who believes that America is a part of Europe that has drifted across the Atlantic. He's a true blue American. Are you seriously telling me that these people are going to put boots on the ground and who are going to face the Russian war machine? The Ukrainians know what that's all about. And Russia paying for, what are you talking about? The reality is the Ukrainian government since 2014 have systematically trampled on the rights of the Russian people. They have systematically disenfranchised them. They have systematically outlawed the Russian language. They have done everything and make them ostracized as a separate, a subsidiary group of people and treated them shamefully. And they are talking about reparations, and they're angry with India. They were angry with India 2 years ago.
So yes, there are multiple ways. There are many narratives, and that's one of the first things you learn really in an IR class. There are so many different narratives of seeing even this conflict, which starts from 2014 onwards. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. But I leave you all, gentlemen, with this note: with Europe pushing for Ukraine to join NATO and Russia firmly against it, and now seemingly emboldened by Trump, can we see long-lasting peace with Europe on board if it is achieved? But thanks a lot for joining me at this point, Professor Nalapat, David, and Ivan as well. We hope to have you gentlemen with us in 24 hours, hopefully when we get some conclusion or some resolution coming in from both these summits. But for now, thanks for watching. Beyond the Headline with Sneha Koshi is on the other side. Stay tuned.